Regardless of the size of your vegetable garden, we often talk about the benefits of adding cover crops. This past fall, we planted several different cool season cover crops into our garden. And that's so that we create an armor of protection over our soil when our vegetable garden might otherwise not be used. Now, those cover crops add nutritional value by their organic matter that we incorporate at this point, but they also help prevent wind and water erosion on that soil. It's sort of like creating an armor to protect your soil through those winter months. We have several different types of cool season cover crops that we've planted here. So behind me here we have Austrian winter peas and also crimson clover. Both of these are legumes, which means they fix atmospheric nitrogen. This means they're able to take the nitrogen that is in the air and convert it through microbial action into a usable form for plants. So when we incorporate these legumes into our soil later, they actually release that nitrogen and make it available for the following crop. So that's why they're important to use as a cover crop. Now next here we have tillage radishes, and this might not look like much because the radishes don't really hold up well to our cool season. But we have some radishes that you can see the vegetation has died on top, but they did exactly what we needed to have them do last fall, and that was to produce a taproot. This particular cover crop is really good for compacted soil as it creates these taproots, creating cavities and channels down through that soil profile. As this cover crop deteriorates, and those taproots deteriorate, they leave those cavities, which allow for better water and nutrient infiltration. We also have two other cover crops that we've used, and we've got rye, and then we also have a hard red winter wheat here. Now you can see how much vegetation that we get upper growth from this plant. And so this is a nice plant because it's going to allow us to incorporate a lot of organic matter that the others might not have as much. So we've got a lot of growth and a lot of fibrous root system. So you can see we've planted individual cover crops, but really what might be best for our situation is to do a mix. And that's why a lot of people will mix these different cover crops. And so here next we have a plot that has what looks like dead plants in here, but this is actually some dead tillage radishes after they've created that taproot. We've got our ryegrass here, and then we also have some crimson clover that will fix that nitrogen, leaving that behind for our next crop that we put in here. At this point, a few weeks before we start looking at planting our warm season, it's time to start thinking about terminating our cover crops as we approach April, when we're going to be planting our warm season crop. And typically you want to terminate your cover crop a few weeks prior to planting your next crop to allow this organic matter to kind of settle in. The other thing is we want to terminate our cover before it goes to seed because we don't want to have any cover crop weeds that we have to deal with later on. So there's a few different ways to terminate your cover crop, but the first thing you need to consider is whether you want to till or not till. Tilling your cover crop is an easy way to integrate it into that soil profile and allow that organic matter to really mix in, which will break it down fairly quickly. It also leaves a nice smooth planting bed for you to plant your seeds or your transplants. However, tilling can be detrimental to that microbial life that's so vital to the soil profile. So if you don't want to till, there are other options. One is to use a broad fork that still will disrupt that soil profile a little bit, but it kind of is a little bit softer than rotor tilling that area. A lot of times if you have a large plot, you might use a flail mower, which just simply cuts that vegetation. In a smaller plot like this, you can use hedge trimmers, you can use weed eaters, basically anything that will really cut that tissue and separate it so that it doesn't continue growing. Another method might be to crimp your vegetation. A crimper is an implement that you can add to the back of a tractor, and basically what that does is it crushes those stem cells, preventing them from continuing growing. You can also get smaller versions of crimpers that you can use or make for your home garden that again will kind of break that stem tissue, causing them to decay, and also just laying them down on the soil surface. So the nice thing about not incorporating them is you're leaving a living organic mulch that is remaining on top of that soil surface. So that'll help with weed suppression and also moisture loss out of your soil. The best thing about all of these cover crops is that they're going to continue to add value and improve your vegetable garden soil. Regardless of whether you're crimping or cutting your plants to terminate them, you may have a little bit of residual regrowth from the base of those plants, depending on the health and the weather that we're having. But it usually is just a minor problem and not any big factor to consider. So regardless, whether you incorporate that cover crop or you leave it on top, you're going to add a lot of organic value into your soil profile. Keep in mind though, if you do leave it on top, you're adding a living mulch that's going to help with moisture retention and also weed prevention.
We hope you enjoyed this video. It's part of our Oklahoma Gardening YouTube channel. You can also find even more videos on our OK Gardening Classics YouTube channel. And join us on social media for great gardening tips, photos, and discussion.